I'm Doug Reno. Had served 36 years on the Indianapolis Fire Department and have been retired for 5 years. I grew up in Brightwood, grew up there in the 50s, went to school at School 51, and right across the street from School 51 was Fire Station 21. Brightwood at the time was the home of the Big Four railroad yards, and there were a lot of people that worked for the railroad that lived in Brightwood. Station Street in Brightwood, the business area, was all the shops were full. There was the Dream Theater, Rush's Drugs, Feed You Well Cafeteria. The doctor we went to was on Station Street, Moonlight Bowling, Heath's Cafeteria, so the shops were full. It was a busy place. It was a fun place to be. I always remember on Halloween they would have the street festival and they'd let the kids come in and paint the windows, and then there would be a party-like atmosphere that would go on all night along Station Street in Brightwood. A bustling community, and when the Big Four railroad caught on fire and burnt, I think that's when the railroad decided to move it out to Avon, which is where it moved to. So.
If you don't mind, because I'm picking it up.
Oh yeah.
You can keep it by you if you need to double check.
You can edit all this stuff out.
Well, I'll still hear the rustling of the paper.
Okay, I'll try not to wrestle too much.
If you don't mind. And you can just answer to me. You don't have to look at the camera. The camera's kind of just here for show. Okay, so grew up in Brightwood. How did you come to be on IFD, and you can maybe talk about your family being on as well?
Yeah. Well, growing up in Brightwood and having the opportunity to be close to the fire station, my father was stationed at Station 21, and his brother before him, which there was 20 years difference between them. A lot of people thought my uncle was my grandfather, but they were both stationed over there in their careers. And one very interesting story my dad would tell me was about kind of the way the community took care of their firefighters in the wintertime, and this was before automatic door openers, and they had coal stoves. So, but in the wintertime, when they'd have a run, they were out and gone. They didn't take time to go back and close the doors, but had a neighbor over there, Mr. Tritipo, who would come over when he heard the engine go out, the engine or the ladder, and he would shut the doors for the guys and go in there and stoke the coal stove up, so there'd be some warmth when they got home. So I always thought that was pretty neat to hear that story.
How far back do you remember what years your uncle,
I know, well, my dad was on the department from 45 to 68, I think. And my uncle was on in the 20s, and he told my dad stories about he was on when they still had the horses. They were getting phased out at the time, and whether it was true or not, but he told my dad that was one of the sub's job, is when the horse got constipated, the sub had to unconstipate the horse. So a kind of humorous little story.
That makes sense. Subs think they have it bad today. They don't have to unconstipate a horse.
Yeah.
Was your dad a veteran?
Yes, he was. He served in the Navy and came to in fact, he was on the fire department in the Navy. He went up to Michigan to the fire school, the Naval Fire School up there.
Oh, okay.
So, and then came out and went on the fire department when he got out of the service.
Nice. You talk a lot about Southern. Did you talk about you talk about your first fire? Do you remember your first fire? Any details about it, or?
Oh yeah, my first day out was I was assigned to Squad 14, and the first day was fairly quiet. A few alarm runs, got to sleep all night that night. Next morning, before we got to run, a man caught in an auger at Indiana Veneer Company. That was a wide awakening, my very first run, because needless to say, it wasn't a very pleasant scene. It was one of my concerns if I could handle seeing something like that. But you kind of kick into, there's a reason you're there, and you try to focus on that. But it was not a pleasant scene, and gave me something to think about for the next few days. So.
And kind of going into what we were talking about, just like how often you see maybe not just death, but just extreme poverty and kids growing up in horrible situations. I mean, how do you process? You saw the guy in the auger. Did that kind of over time? Do you kind of get desensitized because you see it over time, or?
I don't know about. I think it's always kind of hard to see. I think you learn to process it better. Again, you try to focus on, and this was my first run, so I wasn't used to that, so it was probably a little more traumatic than on through my career when I was more focused. I knew what I needed to do, and I would try to focus on that and not get too tied up into what you were really seeing. But my very first year on the job, I probably saw more death and more bodies mangled or burnt. Like I said, my very first run was this guy caught in an auger. He was working there at night by himself and it just pulled him in and did its job on him. And then I had 3 people. I was stationed at 21s. I got to go there and spend some time, and had 3 adults get killed in a train wreck at Sherman in Massachusetts, which is a very well-known intersection for train wrecks, or car and train wrecks. So had that. Then I had 3 little kids that we found in a bathtub all together and died from smoke inhalation on a fire. So I got to see more of my share the very first year I was on. Luckily, years after that weren't near as bad, but I have seen numerous things. I was very fortunate to get to spend the majority of my career in busy stations on the Indianapolis Fire Department. So.
Yeah, you can't. You're on busy companies. You get exposed, you get bathed in the experience pretty quick.
Yeah, and I don't know how gory to get with trying to be careful, but I mean, that's the very first year also, we had a fire up on Alabama where they'd thrown, it was an arson fire, and people were having a party up on the second floor of the apartment house, and it had one of them old wooden stairwells, and someone had taken and thrown gasoline up the stairwell and lit it on fire. Well, that was their only way out. So some of the people were able to make it out, windows and such, but we did find the fire ended up getting out of control, and the floors collapsed on one another, and we had to go through and try to locate 2 other bodies. And when we did find them, their arms and legs were burned off, the features were burned off, and the way we did find them is going through a pile. There was a leg bone sticking out of one of the piles, and that's the way we found them.
Yeah, you mentioned that, and I mention stuff every now and then to my wife or my family, or whatever, and I'm sure you got the same reaction. Like, how do you do that? It's kind of strange. I mean, how do you? We had to get them out of there. They had already gone and gotten one guy's mom because they knew he was one of the 2 that they hadn't accounted for, and that's what we needed to do, and that's
That's what you have to focus on.
It's a task before
It's a task. That's why you're there. Nobody else is going to do it. The coroner comes in, the body's got to be accessible for him. So we're the guys that are tasked with doing that.
Can you talk about like the kind of the organized chaos of a fire? Everybody's got their jobs they're doing. You kind of know what you're doing and know what this group's doing and that group's doing as far as ventilation and that kind of thing. Can you talk about that for like somebody who may not know why is there so many firefighters here? Why do we need this many people?
Can
Or you can jump back to
well, I can go back and relate the way it used to be compared to what it is now.
Sure.
Back before there was incident command, and back in the, well, it goes back a long way. Your basic response would be 2 engines and a ladder and a battalion chief, and if there was a squad in there, you got the squad. That's on a still alarm. So you compare that to the number of apparatus you get now, it's pretty astounding because the streets get backed up with apparatus and people, and back then you didn't have near the number of people to be accountable for, but you did get very used to the crews that you were working with. You knew who you could depend on to do this and that, and there are truck duties and engine duties, and they go hand in hand. Engine guy's not going to do a whole lot if he doesn't have good ventilation, especially back then. Good ventilation was very important so you could do your job. And the chief, he was running the show. He wasn't the incident commander, he was the chief, and he's running the show, and he's there to take care of you, and most of them did a pretty doggone good job of it.
You spend a decent amount of time in a house where there was a truck and engine, where there was the kind of a friendly banter
The rivalry
between
truck guys, engine guys, and who's going to put the fire out. And, it was fun. And you had that rivalry between just houses, especially like with the 14s, 22s, and 5s. At the time, 28s, you had an area where there'd be a lot of times you all got there about the same time. Well, first water on the fire was what you were after, and that competition, I assume it's still there today. It was there then, and it's a good thing to have, I think.
You remember any stories about everybody getting there first and fight to see who's the first one through the door with the line?
Well,
getting lines charged and getting
again, back then, especially riding the tailboard, I noticed things went a lot quicker. Do you want me to go into?
Yeah, sure. You talk about jumping off and not even stopping.
Well, and just pulling out.
Yeah, talk about all
that. You had your boots set on the tailboard, and your coat hung on the ladder usually, or on the handrail, and your helmet up on the hose bed, and a run comes in. First thing you tried to do was get your boots on, if you could get them on before you jumped on, because that chauffeur took off when he was ready to go most of the time. So number one, get your boots on, then hook your arm on the rail and try to get one arm in the coat, and switch arms and put the other arm in, and then get your helmet on if you can. So it was an experience, and you got better at it and more comfortable with it the more you did it. So, but then catching a plug, it was a lot of times each engineer or chauffeur at the time was a little different. Some of them would come to complete stop, but some of them would you'd come to a roll, you'd hop off with the line, the 2.5, wrap the plug, and they were gone before. And a lot of times before the plug catcher could get up to the fire would be out. They moved that quick because it was, you got water pretty quick, and that's one thing that would have to do with who got first water, was if that engine's laying out and their guys are going in, that crew's going to get the water first. So that a lot of times took care of that. But it never got to the point where you were going to get anybody hurt with it. That's the main thing. Friendly competition.
How did you guys back in the day? How did you decide who's catching the plug and who's getting the nozzle?
Each officer would handle it a little differently. You could rotate. Some said if you're on whoever side the plug's on, that's who takes it, you know. And again, when you're on a tailboard, it moves a lot quicker as opposed to having to stop, get out, go back and get it. You're rolling up, you got that, you know what's going on. You got the hose and you're coming off and then they're going. So it was more or less the officer's call on it. But, you know, you'd get your share of getting to go in.
Now, when you were subbing, did the officer kind of give you a little bit of preference, say, hey, I want you with me?
Oh, definitely. On most of them, always on the new guy. You know, you come with me, and they'd take care of you and teach you and show you. So that was a good thing. Yeah.
Now, kind of going on that, can you talk about how what they taught you things in the academy, but when you got out, you really learned the difference between learning something from a book and then going out and experiencing it?
And most everything you get taught in the academy is good stuff, but you really don't know how to apply it until you have to start using it for real. And sometimes, you know, they teach you step 1, 2, 3, and 4. Well, you don't always need step 1, 2, 3, and 4. Sometimes you can do away with one of those steps, and that's where the guys would teach you. And then more or less the part of how to position yourself, where to be. There's places within a fire that are safer than other places. You can pick your position. You don't want to be standing out in the middle of the room throwing water. If you can be in a corner or under a doorway, and you just have to pay attention to your surroundings and respect what you're up against.
Yeah, when you were a battalion chief or division chief, when you had companies in your area and those particular officers, those guys knew how you wanted to run things, and you didn't have to babysit them because you had trust in them, they had trust in you. Can you talk about that a little bit?
That's very important that when I came back out of the office and went back to a battalion, the battalion I went to, I knew all the guys, I was familiar with them, and knew I didn't need to micromanage these guys. I wasn't there to really tell them what to do. I was there to take care of them, watch over them, and they made my job very easy. And the other side that everybody needs to, fires don't go perfectly. I've never seen one go perfectly, and I'd be very surprised if there is one that does. There's so many things that can happen, so many things that can change in a short period of time, and you just trust the folks that are working for you and take care of them, get them what they need to do their job, and they're going to do it.
Kind of along that same lines, you saw something outside that maybe somebody didn't see inside, or vice versa, that trust and knowing, hey, this guy knows what he's doing, I'm not going to pull him out, and you might say, hey, just a heads up, attic's on fire above you.
Sure, and that all comes with experience, and there's the eyes on the inside and the eyes outside. Sure, you relay that information, but that's where it becomes very important for, I think, a chief officer to have come up through the ranks and to have spent the time on the back end. I think the guys on the back end, or the guys fighting the fire, are the backbone of this fire department. And having faith in them and knowing the limits, that just because you've got a fire that looks maybe out of control, if you know what they can do, what they can accomplish, you give them the chance to do that, because that's what they're there for, and that's what they want to do. And if you pull in the range too much, they're going to try to spit that bit out. So if you have a problem that needs to be dealt with, you deal with it. But for the most part, things go pretty good.
A lot of people say, well, there is a routine fire.
Yeah,
Maybe it develops into not a routine fire.
exactly.
You talked about we were talking about complacency, about not getting complacent. Can you just kind of talk about how you, as you get more experience, as you move through the ranks, you got more experience, how did you kind of have respect for a fire and what it can do, and always kind of stay on top of what's going on and what's around you, what the surroundings are, even stuff like the weather, and just can you talk about just kind of respecting a fire? And
Well, one of the books that the department used to use, and I don't know if they still use it or not, is John Norman's books. He says in the beginning of his book about by the time you gain the experience needed on the fire ground, it's going to be time to retire. And that's pretty doggone true. It seems like it's constantly something, you're seeing something you hadn't experienced before. And going back to fighting fire without a mask on, it was tough. I mean, firefighting period is tough. It's hard work. But one of the things I tried to take away from, even though it wasn't probably the best thing to be doing, but fighting a fire without a mask, was you gained respect for that, what you were up against, that fire. It was going to let you do certain things, and there was rules there, and you better follow them or you're not going to be able to get much done. So that kept you, I think, from being complacent. You had to be down low, and at times with your nose on the floor and as flat as you could be. That's the only place you were going to survive and do anything. And one of the interesting things that you could see is the thermal balance when you go into a real smoky fire. And one of the best examples of it is going up a stairwell and getting to the top, and you could see it's just like somebody draw a straight line across that smoke coming down, and you could see where the air was at and where you needed to be, and plus the heat. It put you down where you needed to be, and you didn't want to get up. I did have one good experience. Well, it wasn't a good experience. One experience that taught me a valuable lesson. And I was catching the seat of 14's engine, and I had a new sub, Mike Ransom, had just gotten out of recruit class, was with me. And we had a fire at 2300 block of New Jersey. And it was a 2.5-story residence, big old house. And we pulled up, and the smoke is banking heavy. And could tell the fire's upstairs in the attic area. Well, it was actually, the bedrooms were up there. It was 2.5 stories. So we took our line off and was advancing it up the stairwell, and got up to the landing between the second floor and the attic, and had Mike stand down there and feed me line. And I took the line up, and as I explained before, I'm down on my belly with my nose to the floor, scooting along, trying to locate the seat of the fire. And it's getting hot, and I'm getting ready to open the nozzle up, and Mike hollers, "You're on fire, you're on fire." And I right away opened that nozzle and evidently knocked it down. Well, that taught me that when you're in that position and it does flash or roll on you, the least resistance you can put for that flame to hit, the better off you are. And ended up coming out of there okay. Ended up having to back out because tried making it, and there was no making it any further. It had gotten into the knee wall running around the house, and really needed to get back in, get that knee wall opened up, and wasn't going to do it without a mask on. So I ended up getting my butt kicked on that one, and we backed out and ended up putting the arrows up and took care of it that way. So, but a very valuable lesson, in my opinion, on why you need to be down and low and not up on your feet, standing vertical.
Have you ever had a fire where maybe you or other people have had to bail out? I mean, just bail out the window because it got something happened real quick, something flashed real quick, and
That's, I guess, the closest to it. Oh, well, let me back up. I do remember one, and I had only been on maybe not even a year. Anyway, had a downtown in a business, downtown fire. It was late at night, and same scenario, we pull up, there's heavy smoke coming out of the front door of this old building. It's on Delaware, I think. And I think it was might have been either a store or a bar. I know there was a counter that we crawled along, and I was with an officer off of 13's engine, and well-respected guy. I'm trying to hang right with him. We're down low, crawling back there, and it's getting hotter and hotter. And we can hear the popping and the crackling. Haven't seen any fire yet, just smoke, heat, and the noise. And he says, "We got to get out." So sure enough, we turn around and go to get out, and just as I reach the front door, but backing out, a hand reaches in and grabs me and yanks me out the door, and the minute that happened, the fire blew out the door and the windows, and it was the chief that was there on the scene that had grabbed me and pulled me out of there. So very full of gratitude towards him.
how do you explain that kind of feeling, but we got to get out? 'Cause I'm sure you've experienced that before. Like, you've been someplace you're like, things aren't looking too good. And how do you explain that to? That's something you learn from experience.
You
Do.
do. Again, it goes back to the experience and being there, and hopefully when it does happen, there's just somebody. I was lucky that I had a guy there that knew, let's go, you know. Would I have known? No. I was ready to go wherever he wanted to go. But he made the right call. And again, it's about being aware. Don't be complacent. Be aware of your surroundings. When you go in, stop, take a look, see what's happening. What's that smoke doing? The other big thing today is what kind of construction do you have? That, to me, in today's fire service is one biggie. You can't let new construction burn near as long as you could these old places. You could let them go for quite a while and still go in and put them out. These new ones, you're not going to do that on. So again, you have to be aware and be thinking about what's going on and respect what you're up against. That is, don't be complacent. It's going to get you if you are.
For somebody who just thinks firefighters pull up on the scene, they run right in, put the fire out. You're talking about being aware of what's going on. What are some of the things you're looking at with the building that you can tell right away, like, well, we got a base because there's a window there, there's probably a stairwell right there because of this. Can you talk about some of those things you're looking at in the building?
Well, a lot of it's got to do whether it's a free burning building or all you see is smoke. If all you see is smoke, you want to be really careful. If you have a free burning building and it's well ventilated, you can pretty much tell where you need to go. And but with the smoke, it makes the visibility worse. You can't take too long to do it, but you need to have it. The thought there is pay attention to the color of the smoke, where it's coming from. Or is there more than one way out? That most of the time you're guessing. You're looking at it. Well, I've been in this type house before. If there's a door here, there should be some windows here, or another door back over here. So a lot of it comes from experience doing that, and you got to make a guess on what you think, but don't not think about it. So.
As you look into your list, is there something that you made a note on or anything you want to kind of get more on? Or I don't want to skip anything that you want to talk more about.
Oh, just the where was it? The close call witness, just to kind of reinforce paying attention, like what we were just talking about. Another good lesson I learned was we had a barber shop came in on Harding Street, and I was on Five's engine, was a lieutenant on Five's engine at the time, and it came in as a box alarm, and we get there, and it's a Sunday afternoon, middle of the afternoon, and there's light smoke in the building. So we're getting the thing, the door popped, and going in, trying to check it out, trying to find it, and there's guys up on the roof looking, and they got the building laddered, and I'm in there with Tommy Roberts. He's off of Truck 5. And we're going around, can't find anything, so we would start walking around feeling the walls. And sure enough, we found a wall that had a hot spot in it, pretty doggone hot. And Tommy's there, got a pickhead axe, and he takes one swing and puts a hole in that drywall, and it just explodes. I mean, it knocked me down, knocked Tommy down. The battalion chief on the scene said it blew the doors out and raised the roof up about 3 inches. And it was just what was between those two studs in the wall had been contained, and that just shows you the force. Doesn't have to be a whole lot, but can have a lot of power behind it. So it's just another watch and pay attention to what's going on and be ready for something to happen. Anything. Yeah. There was one other.
What year did you come on?
1976.
76.
Yeah. Oh, that's another little story on the deal on why did I want to come on.
Oh, yeah.
Like I said, I grew up around the fire service. I was around it my whole life. My dad's friends, just about all his friends were firefighters, and they became like second family to us. We were all, the guys you worked with, their families, we'd get together, cookouts, take trips. They were just good friends. And I'd sit and listen to fire stories, because like if we'd go, it'd be sitting around the campfire, and it was just like today. Guys like to tell their fire stories, and they had them, and they were a little different than today. And I can remember my dad sitting there talking stories, and he'd bring up the term snot candles. And I thought, what in the world's a snot candle? And he kind of explained, smoky fire and all that. Well, once I got on the job, I found out, especially fighting the fires without a mask, what snot candles were, and the tougher the fire, the bigger the snot candles. But that's just your body telling you that we don't like what's going on here. So that and having a tough, smoky fire and going back and laying down and trying to go get some more rest, and you're laying there with a crushing headache thinking, well, maybe I'm not realizing then, but knowing now, carbon monoxide poisoning setting in. And then even taking a shower in the winter not after smoking, but let me back up. After having a tough, smoky fire, even a couple weeks later, been taking a shower and have a chest cold and cough, and you're still coughing up black, nasty stuff, after that. So it wasn't, it was tough on you. I mean, it was tough on your system, and but that's the way we did it then. So.
Can you talk about what would you rather? Would you rather same fire, tough fire, good smoky fire, a lot of work going on? Would you rather fight that in a really, really hot day in the summer or a really, really cold day in the winter?
Cold day in the winter.
Why?
The heat, well, you get enough heat in the fire, and at least in the winter when the fire's out, you can cool down a little bit. In the summertime, there's no getting away from the heat. You're already overheated, you're sweating like crazy, and it just seems to drain you a lot more. Now, don't get me wrong, there was times in the winter when we only have one set of gear, and you've already been out and everything's soaking wet, and you just get back and you put that stuff right back, and especially if you're riding the tail end on the back step. You're putting it on and it's freezing cold, below zero, and you're right back out in it. That wasn't pleasant either, but as far as just fighting the fire, I'd rather do it in the winter time than perfect firefighting weather, 30 degrees.
I think if you asked 50 people that question, do you think you'd get a good mix?
I think
You think most people would be cold?
it'd be cold.
Yeah,
I mean,
can see that. I'm talking about miserable cold though, like
oh well,
hoses all frozen.
I've done that. But if you're fighting a fire, I mean, now if you're standing out just throwing water on a second alarm fire, give me one in the summertime. If you're going in and fighting a tough fire where you're in there for a while, and give it to me in the wintertime. But standing out lobbing water and getting covered in water and then trying to pick the hose up, 21st and Northwestern, it was 60 below wind chill that day. There was...
Were you there?
Yeah.
Yeah, talk about that. There's
There
a lot
was-
of pictures of that one.
Yeah, there were, my memory's not real good, but I think there were 4 or 5 chiefs that fell into the loading dock pit in the back because it was full of water and it would freeze over and it'd come across there and fall in. Maybe it wasn't all chiefs, I'm sure some, but there were 4 or 5 people that fell in that pit. And the hose, they had to bring in flatbed trucks because we couldn't get the hose drained quick enough, so we loaded it like logs up onto the flatbed. And 14's engine pulled up at the start of the fire and there was a plug right in front, and he hooked up right to it. Well, he ended up having to get in and pull away with the suction still hooked up just because the wind took the fire and blew it out and was going to burn the engine up. So he had to pull away real quick. So it was a long, cold day, but there was a heat treating company across the street that saved us. They opened their doors up to us, and we could all go over and get nice and warm. But the bad thing is you'd get nice and warm, and then you had to go right back out and get nice and cold again. I'll never forget one old guy there. He said, you gotta save a little bit of this, and he had a big piece of 6x6 timber that he was carrying around still smoking to keep his hands warm.
Not a bad idea.
No.
Okay, let's see. What else is there? Anything like nostalgic or any kind of experiences about how you look back at your experience? And,
Oh man, yeah. Looking back, I mean, best thing that ever happened to me. The opportunities that it provided for me. Basically, when I went on the fire department, I grew up, I admired my dad. I was always so proud when it come to, like in school, when they'd ask you, what did your dad do? I couldn't wait for him to get to me so I could tell him what my dad did. And I was always very proud of that. And like I said, I'd spent time at Station 21. I'd go over after school, and I'll never forget one year I was in the Boy Scouts or the Cub Scouts, and I had to earn a merit badge, and I had to bake a pie. And the guys over there helped me bake the pie. Of course, I had to take the ribbon over baking the pie from them, and they all liked to tease and torment. But just a lot of good memories of that. But the reason I eventually went on the department was I got married at a young age and had a family. And at the time, I wasn't old enough to go in the fire department. So I served an apprenticeship in a printing company and was making pretty good money. And things were going pretty good. And but the economy turned around in the early 70s and started making me think twice. So I started, with the encouragement from my father, to try out for the fire department. Well, it took me, I didn't make it my first try, I didn't make it my second try, I didn't make it my third try, and my fourth try was when at the time, the age limit was 30 and I was 29 and a half, so it was my last try. And luckily I made it on then, and haven't regretted it since. It was the best thing I ever did. I was lucky that my wife was very supportive. She was always involved. In fact, to this very day, we come down to help out with breakfast, and she comes out to help. She knows all the guys I know, got friendships with all of them, and that's a very important thing on the department, is to have that support at home. Because of what we talked about before, the things you see. Now, I didn't go at home and share all the gruesome details with her, but she knew. And going home, when you have seen things like that, especially like the 3 little kids, and you just want to, it's time to go home. And to find that comfort at home, and it means a lot. And I don't think I could have made it without that. But with all that in mind, still the benefits I received from the department, I was very fortunate that I got promoted and moved up through the ranks. Never had any idea, dream that I would be able to do that. The opportunities were there, and sometimes persistence on my part paid off, because I was never the guy that was going to be at the top of the list, but I hung in there and went forward. But just, I was on the dive team, the rope, high angle rescue, hazmat, just things that I'd have never got to experience or be a part of without that. And the fire department gave that to me. Plus just the self-satisfaction in what you're doing, the friendships, the camaraderie, as you hear everybody talk about, it's there and it's true. And there's just a closeness of being with people that you've been in pretty tough situations with that makes you appreciate them quite a bit. So worked with a lot of good people, saw guys do some really amazing things that some people would say, well, that's impossible or improbable, whatever. They did it, and something to be proud of.
Nice. I have to ask, because something that came up I was wondering about earlier, and you said, when you came on, did you ever work with any of the guys that work with your dad?
Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah, my very first officer.
Okay.
On Squad 14.
Oh, Squad 14, okay.
Squad 14 was Bud Galvo. He was my very first officer, and he knew my dad. I got to work with quite a few when I first came on. That, of course, what they end up calling me by my dad's name, because they'd forget my first name and they'd say, "Hey, Denny," that was my dad's name. And that didn't hurt my feelings a bit. It was kind of an honor, you know. But that is one thing that I guess it puts a little pressure on you to follow in your father's footsteps, because from what I heard, my dad had a pretty good reputation, and I never can remember one guy saying, well, if you're half the fireman your dad was, you're going to be okay. So that makes you feel pretty good. But it makes you think, boy, can I do this, you know? And it all worked out.
Is there anything else you can think of? Going back through the stuff or any notes you made? Or?
I think I've covered on the good fireman. I mean, that does mean a lot, that the average person, I mean,
it means more than the words say.
It does. To me, if I look back on my career, the best time I had on the fire department and the fondest memory is on the back step of Engine 14. It's not getting promoted to whatever rank, no matter how high. It's been on the back step of that engine is my good memories. And a lot of that comes from most of it, the people you're with, the people you work with, the respect that they have for you and you have for them, the teasing and tormenting, the sitting around in the morning drinking coffee and the shift change and hearing the stuff that goes on. But it's really the when you're put in a bad situation and you got people around you that you know are going to take care of you and you're going to do your darndest to take care of them, and everybody, the people that feel that way know it, and it gives you a little bit of comfort because of the job you're doing. And it's something, I think it's forever, you know, you have that feeling forever because the relationships were pretty special.
Yeah. I almost think a better way to word that would be he or she was a hell of a fireman. Because you can say, oh, what do we think about this guy? Hey, he's a good guy. Yeah, he's a good fireman.
Well, you're right,
But then when
yeah.
someone says, oh, he was a hell of a fireman.
Yeah, that helped.
It's like, wow, coming from this person, that's a big
And
compliment.
that, again, the accolades or it wasn't so much, it wasn't the rank of the person saying that, it was the type of person. What that guy, if that guy says it, it means a lot more than this guy over here.
Right.
Because you know what he did, and you may not know what this fellow did. So it goes a long way. The experience and the way you've conducted yourself and the job you've done. Again, you don't have to toot your own horn.
Right.
The word's going to get out on you. People are going to know, and then you just have to live up to those expectations.
Excellent. Are you good? Anything else?
Have we covered everything on just the complete? I mean,
I know one thing we did talk about pretty in depth, and if you want to add anything too, is your experience at the Murat. Because that's something I'd like to do a little segment. Just
I'll tell you what, after I came in and talked. Hi, Steve.
Dougie, how are you?
I'm fine. How you doing?
Good, buddy.
This guy can tell you what an asshole I was when I was a chief.
Yeah. Best thing people work for.
Anyway, Steve was there on that.
Okay.
Yeah, but one of the best things I saw that you did was when you guys did the first in, last out thing, and when you had that group of guys sitting together. They're pretty much saying a lot of what I've said about different things, you know, in that little scenario. But that was a long day, wasn't it, Steve? The Murat.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
But it was just, the worst part of it was hearing the screaming and the hollering when that happened.
No, we'll forget hearing. Are you?
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
The kid that was trapped, I crawled back in there to him. And Charlie, and he was bent over a rafter and had the other one on his back.
It had him.
Oh, yeah.
That arm was like that, and he was just slammed down to the ground.
He says, am I going to die? And I said, no, you're not going to die. I told him, I said, I'm staying here with you. until we get you out of here. They know you're back here, they're coming to get you. But it was scary because you could hear, worrying about the rest of it falling in, and you could hear it creaking and cracking. And
Well, when that happened and things had finally settled, like I said, I was up on top and had fallen through, and I'm hanging there on 2 rafters, and then I started hearing them holler and scream.
You were there to be.
I,
Where were you at then?
I was at 5s.
You were 5s.
Yeah. I drug the line in because 11s went in thinking there were standpipes in there, and I knew there wasn't, so I drug a line in for them. But you could go in after it happened. There was doors to where you could go into the actual room itself where all these carts, and those carts saved a lot of people. And I think that's probably where you was able to.
Yeah.
But then to get him out, we had to go in from the top, and we just started. What happened is there was guys in various places, like 6 or 8, I can't
6 or 8
remember.
of them, I can't remember now.
Donnie Thomas and Dixon, Chris Pitts.
Yeah, like I say, Pitts was.
Greasing.
Greason was down with Charlie. They took Greason out the other way. He had a he got burns on his back from that timber laying on him for so long. But anyway, what happened was we started pulling guys that were coming out from the top that weren't buried as deep. And then when one guy'd get out, it would create a cavity for somebody else. And then so the more you got out, so that when we got the last one out, other than Charlie was the last one out. But what it did, it created cavities so I could worm my way down in there, and we took porta power down in there because we couldn't get the hearse stuff there because the 7s had it on there, and they were the ones that were trapped. So anyway, we took porta power because you couldn't really get a hearse tool down there, there wasn't room, and we just started taking porta power stuff and jacking up until we could lift that, what was mashing him down, lift it up and get him out of there. But it was a long day.
Could have been a whole lot worse.
Oh,
Could have lost a bunch
there
of
were.
guys there.
Those guys thought they were dying.
Yeah.
I mean, not screaming, but hollering. You know, and then they had the cleaning fluids that got spilt, and fumes started coming off of it, and then guys were running out of air. You know, and if you couldn't get your mask off, you was going to suffocate.
That was a scary part right there.
That's a scary thought right there.
Yeah.
But that deal you did on that would, you know, that first in, last out, I thought that was good with having good guys interact with one another, bring stuff up. So I've talked about all I can talk.
All right. I think we're good to go.
Good to go.
Yeah, if you want to just kind of introduce yourself and talk about, growing up and where you grew up and how you got in the fire department and all that.
Okay.
And you can answer to me, and you don't have to look at the camera.
I can look at you.
Yep.
I'd rather do that.
Yeah.
I'm Doug Reno. Was born in 1947. Grew up, first 3 or 4 years of my life was 2300 block of Dearborn. Moved over, staying in Brightwood, to 2800 block of Adams. My father was on the fire department, was stationed at Station 21 at Alney and Glenwood. Went to school at School 51, which was right across the street from Station 21, and would go by and see my father after school and get harassed by most of the firefighters there at the station. And at that time, they had an engine and a ladder at the 21s, and it faced south at the point of Glen Drive and Alney. So I pretty much grew up around the fire service, and went to a lot of functions with my mother and father with their friends, of family outings and wiener roasts and cookouts. And got to listen to lots of fire stories around campfires and just different events. So was very familiar with the fire service before I came on the fire department. Growing up, I went to work at a printing company to serve my apprenticeship, getting out of high school, and got married and became a father at a very young age. So it was very important to me to provide my family with a good income. And at the time, the fire service didn't look real attractive to me because of the amount of money that they made. But I always did really respect. I mean, I remember when I was a kid in school, I couldn't wait if they were asking what your father did. Couldn't wait for them to get to me so I could tell them I was proud my dad was a fireman. And that anytime that would happen, it made my day. So I did respect what he did. I'm a small guy. He was a little bigger than me, and I always looked up to him and didn't know if I could quite accomplish what he did. So anyway, to make a long story short, the economy changed, the printing business wasn't so good, and the fire service started looking better because it was much more secure than what I was doing. So I started on my quest to accomplish that, but it took me 4 tries to make it. I made it on my very last try. At the time, the age limit was 30. I was 29 and a half, so I finally made it. Got on in June 16th of 1976. At that time, the school was paid. When they hired you, you were paid to go to the school, and it was 6 to 8 weeks of training out on Michigan Street there behind the old ones. That's where the training academy was. And you went 8 hours a day and got your training. When you graduated, you were assigned as a sub on a shift, and you filled in as we do now at all the stations around the city.
You talked about your uncle too, had the connection to the...
Oh, yes. As far as family history, my father wasn't the first. His uncle, he was 20-some years older than my dad, thought that he was his father, but they weren't. They were brothers. But anyway, he was on back when they had horses at the very end of the time period when horses were used. And I don't know how true it was, but the story coming from my dad that my uncle told him that one of the sub's basic jobs was when the horse got constipated to unconstipate the horse. So I don't know if it was just a little teasing or what was going on there, but anyway, I have a long history in my family on the fire service, and that means a lot to me.
And you were, of course, that obviously was an awful job to have, but comparatively, I mean, even when the horses left, what were some of the jobs the sub had to do that weren't the most desirable things?
Well, just the normal maintenance around the house, the taking care of the apparatus. I'm sure I didn't get into a lot of detail on that, but I know as things evolved up through the years, quite a few guys could probably tell you about using waste, which is a straw-like material that you could use to take kerosene, and you would clean the underneath side of the apparatus. And of course, I'm sure today, even with housework, usually the sub's job is to clean the locker room and stuff. And so it's not near what it used to be, but some things will never change.
And when you were sub, when you had fires, how do you remember kind of learning the ropes when you were coming on? I mean, you had a history, so you kind of knew a little bit about the fire department, especially with your family and hanging around the firehouse. But do you think that gave you an edge up when you got hired?
I don't think it gave me an edge up on the fire, because you really don't, until you experience it, it's kind of hard to describe or to teach anybody. But as far as I knew, I went in and kept my mouth shut going in. I knew that, and to pretty much sit and wait for somebody, or not wait, but like go in and ask what's expected of me and what do you want me to do. But I was very fortunate. The people I got to work with took the time to take me aside and show me and tell me and lead by example a lot. So that's invaluable. And if John Norman, a chief on the New York Fire Department, put it pretty well in his book, and he's in the front of, if you read it, is that by the time you gain the experience on the fire department where you feel comfortable about what you're doing, it's time to retire. And that's, I think, pretty true, because you take your training and you try to do your job the way you were trained, but experience is invaluable.
And how did you, the ranks as promotion, did you take some of the things that you admired as a leader when you were learning and apply that to how you led as an officer? People were underneath your command? Or?
Oh yeah, you really, I mean, you get to work for a variety of people, so you can, I mean, each guy usually is a little bit different in the way they do things, and but the biggest thing is, you know, you treat people fair, you try to lead them in the right way, and the further you go and you're up the ladder, the more you find out you work more for them than they work for you. I mean, as you go up, it's more evident. You spend more of your time working, you're taking care of them, and in turn they'll take care of you. One of the chiefs that they, back when they first started the drop, and they honored him at the awards banquet one time. And he said, you take care of the fire department and the fire department will take care of you. Those are pretty simple words, but there's a lot of meaning there behind it that's very true.
And also we talked to Chief Olson. I think that phrase carries a lot of weight in the fire department. And can you talk about the phrase, he or she was a good firefighter, like how that's a little bit different than just a pat on the back? It really means something coming.
Yeah, well, I mean, the job itself, I mean, once you experience going in on a pretty tough fire and doing your job and seeing what it takes, to be good at doing that with everything that's involved, and to have the guys you're working with know they can depend upon you, means a lot. It just does. It's your life is usually on, not usually, but a lot of times on the line when you're doing your job. You don't know what's going to happen, and you learn very soon how much of a team effort it is. It's not one guy that's going to be able to go in there and do that. It takes the support of everybody there, pretty much. So I think that's probably most firefighters' goal, is it makes you feel good to have somebody, yeah, he did his job well. So it means a lot.
Can you talk about fighting fire, like the different aspects of, you know, truck companies? What do truck companies typically do on a fire as opposed to an engine company and maybe a squad and a safety chief, a battalion chief? What can you talk about how that all works together as kind of a coordinated effort during fire?
Well, when I first came on, there was only, you'd have 2 engines, a ladder, and a battalion chief. Today, it is due to NFPA standards and just the involvement of the department, you get a whole list of stuff. You get bunches and bunches. But on a basic fire, you've got your engines. Your first company will in, will lay the line, advance the line. The second company coming in backs up that first company. They lay the lines, do the interior attack, and your ladder companies will do search, ventilation, and all that. And your squads are there to assist in search unless there's a need for EMS, then they take over and take care of that. Your safety officers, which is something we haven't always had, which is well needed and we do have now, they watch out for the firefighters' well-being. So things have evolved, become much safer, much better, but it still requires taking a chance. And if you're trained right and you follow the safety rules as much as you can, things are better off today.
And you went through the transition between when IFD started getting into EMS, before it was fires only, and some rescue calls. You had some squads did rescue calls. Can you talk about how that transition was and how that kind of took place, and maybe some roadblocks, people not really buying into it? Or
Oh, well, when I went regular at Station 14, and we had the engine, ladder, and squad there. And the squad ran all the EMS. You had to be an advanced EMT. You got advanced EMT training when you went on the department. Just kind of back up, not advanced EMT.
Yeah.
Advanced first aid. You weren't an EMT. So, and even the guys on the squad weren't EMTs. But as the need arose and the department trying to serve the community better, it was time to start putting EMTs on the job. And plus it helped secure the job because money was getting tight, they were cutting budgets, looking at the run load. At the time, a busy engine was a 1,000-run engine. That's strictly fires, but that was a busy engine if you had. So, and at the areas in town that had the squads, there was 14s, 7s, 29s, 17s, 2s. So those areas were the only ones that had a squad to where if the engine would be out, you could get first aid through that squad. So the needs arose, well, we need to provide better protection. So they started promoting the EMT program. And then it became mandatory. Everybody had to go. Well, there was a lot of guys that fought it, didn't go. I was about 8 or 9 years into being on the department. I knew it's coming for me, so I went ahead and went early on. But it changed the department. The run loads went up. It was just a different facet of the department that not everybody got to experience. Some did, some didn't, and now we all do. So you can argue good or bad, but I think as far as the community goes, it's a good thing for the community and benefited. And it saved some jobs too.
Yeah. Somebody mentioned that too. Like, well, we had to change, or if we didn't, that's where everybody was moving towards, and if we didn't change it, we were left behind.
And it goes along with the different. You didn't have the rope rescue. You didn't have none of that was there. You know, you had Station 7 that had some extrication equipment. Well, the squads did too. Had extrication, but it was porta power. It wasn't the Hearst tools and all that. It was, hydraulic pumps, and you had spreaders and wedges and cribbing and stuff that you'd do the best you could do with. But there wasn't the water rescue, the rope rescue, the hazmat. None of that was there. All this is stuff that was developed and promoted, and it not only helped save jobs, but to me it provided me with opportunities I'd have never had to if I was doing anything else. I got high angle rope rescue. I got to be a diver. I got hazmat technician. So I'd have never got to do that. And then I was able to go diving in the Caribbean when I'd go on vacation somewhere. So
you're already certified.
Yeah.
Like to ride the experience of riding the tailboard of an engine.
Oh.
Not a lot of people got to experience that.
Yeah.
Nobody now who's on really, well, a few maybe, but.
Yeah, and when I came on, it was about half and half. You still had about half the engines were the old you can ride the back end, and the other half they'd just gone to the cab over where you rode up in the cab facing backwards. It still wasn't enclosed, but anyway, it was about half and half. But most of the time, in the wintertime, if something went wrong, you were going to get a reserve, and you rode the back end. Plus, like I said, about half of them were still you rode the back step. But fun in the summertime. And one of the biggest benefits was laying a line. You pull up, you got a fire, you know it. Most of the time the guys they would just slow down. They didn't come to a stop. You grabbed it was a 2.5-inch supply line. You grabbed the line and the hydrant wrench, jumped off, wrapped the plug, and they were gone. They just slowed down. They were gone the minute you stepped off. And it was a lot quicker getting water on the fire. That's one of the biggest things I noticed after I'd gotten promoted and being in a buggy and watching things happen, was the time frame from the time an engine stops, laser line, of the time they get the water. Now, I'm not knocking anybody it's just a safety thing. It's a fact that you got to get out of that cab, you got to walk back, and so that is a big difference. But it's much safer with what they have today. I would never promote let's all go back to the riding a tailboard, and I don't know if anybody's ever brought it up on about the cabs. When the chief that bought the engines, they had cabs on them, and they had them cut off because he said you couldn't make a good size up sitting inside a cab. So all those engines originally came with tops over the chauffeur and the officer, and they had them cut off. So
really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Back in the 70s, the 13s, the enclosed cabs that are still open, like you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
They showed them going on a run. They were inside, and they were coming back from a run. They were both standing up.
Oh.
Looking over the top of the cab. They were both standing up on the back.
We rode like that going.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You rode like that going. And the other thing I wanted to mention on the riding the tailboard in the wintertime, if it was really cold, you turned around backwards and hooked your arms and rode backwards so you weren't getting hit with that blast. That or coming back sometimes, it was real cold, crawl underneath the hose tarp and try to stay warm that way.
Below zero wind chill days, I can only imagine. Let's see. Oh, something I asked Chief Olson. Can you talk about the camaraderie and the traditions of IFD? Some of the things you really appreciated and like, and really stick with you.
Well, the camaraderie is one of the best parts of the job. Is you end up with a second family. If anybody really needed something, whether it be moving or work on their house or whatever, there was that. All you had to do was say something, and pretty soon somebody's planning or talking, when you need us, where you need us, what do you need? And it got done. And then there was the Christmas parties at Christmas time, picnics during the summer. Somebody'd have a place at the lake, you'd go, spend a lot of time together. It was your second family. Wives got to know each other, kids got to know each other. Like I said, I grew up around the fire department, and I got to experience that. So I kind of expected it, knew what was coming going along. So, and when I came on, there was still a few guys that knew my dad, and of course you get, well, if you're half what your dad was, you'll be okay, So.
Did you ever have any that you want to talk about, or did you ever have any close calls? Any fires you think of, like, man, that was a tough one, or think of?
Well, quite a few tough ones. I was fortunate. I got to spend a lot of time during my career at the busy houses, 14s, 5s, 3s. Got to work with good people, and I don't like to beat my own.
Oh, no, that's fine. You can if you want. You don't have to skip anything.
I experienced some things that I think, well, you tend to be complacent. That's, I think, human nature. And the experience of fighting a fire without a breathing apparatus, believe me, I wouldn't promote it. It's a good thing we don't do it anymore, that it has evolved. But I felt like it made me respect what I was up against. When very first one I had was pretty good, and I'm in there doing all kinds of silly stuff. And it taught me real quick, you're not going to do that. It keeps you where you need. If you're going in there without the mask and it's really a smoky fire and it's banking down, the only way you're going to survive is to be down low and you're on your belly looking for all the air you can get. And that's the safest place in a situation like that, especially if it flashes or whatever. And I never fell through a hole when I was crawling along on my belly. So trying to look for good in that, that's the good I try to take from it, is it taught me respect for what I was up against. And you truly do have to, because what you're up against is a lot of unknown and a lot of stuff you don't have any control over and can't. And you need to put yourself in the best position you can when fighting that fire. Even on when you're in a room or you're going up the stairwell and under the doorway, in a corner. There's places that are better than others, and it's not standing in the middle of the room. But again, I'm not promoting we need to, or that needs to be part of training or whatever. But don't get complacent, I guess, is the best thing you can do. And it's a hard thing to do, because you get all the protection on, and you think it feels like you're invincible, and you want to rush in and get in there, and sometimes that's not the best thing to be doing. So
that's a good point. Along the same lines, IFD is kind of known for aggressive interior firefighting. You said you spent time at busy houses.
Uh-huh.
What are some of the things about the firefighters when you went to a busy house, especially early on in your career? What are those things you picked up on, like how they showed you how to do things, and was it kind of a shock to you, and then how did you learn over the years to?
I guess early on, I'm pretty amazed at what they could do. I mean, you walk up and it's, the house is on fire, and you're going in there, and in a matter of minutes, it's out. And just watching and paying attention and hanging with them to see how they went about getting that done. It's the other thing is, and I think Joe hit on that, is that the number of people that you have there. Well, I didn't get to experience what he did with the 5 and 6, but there would be, like I said, 2 engines and a ladder, so you didn't have the number of folks rushing in like we do now. Again, because once they're in their gear and ready to go, they tend to move a lot quicker than what we did. But just paying attention to your surroundings, knowing what to look for, you went more by what you were feeling when you were in there. And again, as far as the air, you'll find that if you can find the seat of the fire and it's free burning, there's air there to breathe. And it's not real pleasant, but you breathe out of your coat. Your coat held a lot of air you could breathe. A fog nozzle. Fog nozzle was never intended to be used on an interior firefight. But it got used during the war. Guys bought it back, and it was a pretty nifty tool. Well, one of the good things is if it's really bad, you could open that, put it on wide fog, and get a lot of air off of it. The bad thing is if you put it on a fog and introduce it into a room and contents, if you're ever on the receiving end of that, it's not a pleasant thing to have happen to you, or it almost looks like if you've ever seen any video of the opposite side of somebody putting a stream in a window or whatever, and a window on the outside, it's almost like an explosion when it comes out. And it's steam, and that steam seems like it can get in your coat, up your arms, down your back. It's pretty unpleasant. So that's one thing you never wanted to do, was put a line in the window if a crew's in there doing an interior attack.
You cussed out pretty quick. Let's see. Would you, especially with EMS?
Well, that's one thing I was concerned with when I came on the fire department, because I knew through my dad, hearing him, things he'd see, and he wouldn't get into all the details with us, but we knew it wasn't good a lot of times. So I was a little concerned about, am I going to be able to handle this when I see it? But you truly focus so much on why you're there and what you should be doing. That's, I guess, the channel you need to take. Don't get wrapped up into what you see other than what you need to be thinking. What should I be doing? What can I do to help this person? If anything, because you see, it's unbelievable. I've seen the human body. It's just amazing. You think you've seen it all, and then you haven't. You see something else. But my very first run, just as an example, my very first run on the fire department on Squad 14 was to Indiana Veneer Company. The night watchman, or the night guy working in there, got caught in an auger wheel. And I won't go into detail, but there wasn't much left when we got there. So that was my first exposure to it. And that first year I saw more death, more the body being destroyed, burnt, car wrecks. The first trucker that got killed on the interstate, I had no idea. But again, you try to channel it through, I'm there to do a job, and you try to stay focused on that. And of course, a lot of the way you handle that is like on fire fatalities or bad accidents where you may be talking to someone for a few, and in a few minutes that's not going to be possible, that they're going to be gone. You go back to the firehouse, and there's a firehouse humor, if that's what you want to call it. I think that's a way of channeling things out. Guys get together, they do talk about it, but they don't, woe is me, talk about it, other than the toughest things, the kids. And I had kids of my own. There's times that I love my job. I like going in every day, always look forward to it, but there was a few times I was glad to go home. I was glad to go home and see my kids and my wife and be with them. So I think that's another way of channeling it. And that you need that support at home, because there are things that firefighters see that maybe you handle it this time, but you don't that, or maybe this bothers this guy, but it don't bother this guy. So between the support you have from the guys you're working with to the support you have when you're at home makes a big difference.
Kind of the opposite. You talk about the good things, the times where you made a huge difference in somebody's life. It doesn't have to mean you pulled somebody out of a house. It may just mean you just happened to be there to shut the water off because they couldn't figure out how to, stuff like that. How that kind of justifies or overshadows maybe the good overshadows the bad. And can you talk about that a little bit? Making a difference.
Well, that's I only got to experience it one time, but is the birth, delivering a baby. you're thinking, ooh, do I really want to do that? Well, again, you're there, you got to do something. So, but just seeing a life being born, I mean, you see so many lives going the other way, but to see one being born, or to get somebody out and do that CPR and they start breathing again, and you know they got a good chance of making it. It's very gratifying. It's the pluses. That's why you're doing what you're doing in reality. And you're getting paid back now for, and the gratification not only from if you've saved a life or from assisting in saving a life. It's if you've made a good stop on a fire and you've kept it to this spot. That's a good feeling, you know. Yeah, used to always really be a good feeling was I worked for some really good chiefs that were very experienced and been around a long time, and a lot of them would have a reputation of how soon they hit the box or how long they held off, and it was always felt good to go in and put that out before they could hit the box. So just little things like that you get the gratification from.
A lot of the fires that don't make the news are the best ones because you got to stop them before they burn to the ground.
I got an award one time. Well, it was my very first award. It was when I was at the 14s. We were in with the 23s. It was a mattress fire up in the bedroom of a old home over there, and the guy was up there sleeping. Well, I helped getting him out, but I always felt like it was tougher for me to go back in because we handed him out the window, and I went back in and got the mattress, and it was tougher getting the mattress out than it was getting the guy out. So
let's ask a couple more questions unless you have anything else. What to new people coming on right now, just knowing what you...
Oh, wow. The number one thing is, I think I've touched on it already, is complacency. Don't get you're going to fight it. Work at not getting complacent. Go by what you've been trained. Pay attention to your surroundings. Respect what you're up against. Have true respect for that. It's more powerful than you are. It's going to change in ways you can't imagine. Pay attention to your surroundings and don't get complacent. The other thing is with the fitness program, it got started about, I think, in the early 80s. It's one of the best things for me. I did a few push-ups and sit-ups and stuff usually but as far as an aerobic workout, I really got involved in that. Again, due to my stature and everything, I needed all the help I could get to function at my job. And you need that physical endurance, and you need to stay in the best shape you can. It's going to help you when you get injured. It helps you. You can't do your job 100% without being in the best shape you're in. It's a physical job, and it requires you to be in good physical shape. So maintain your fitness. Enjoy the people around you. You're going to be around some great people. Have that camaraderie. And again, respect your job. So you take care of it, and it'll take care of you.
There you go. Is there anything else you can think of you want to touch on? Or? I've got more questions, but were you ever injured? Did you ever have any injuries?
Oh yeah. I mean, no major injuries. I've been burnt several times, second degree at the worst. At the Marat, fell through the floor there. It opened up, and I was lucky enough to catch myself. I actually fell between two rafters and ended up hanging by my armpits between two rafters because I didn't know how far down everything was. So
I'm glad you mentioned that, and I'm going to start this over.
it's
I'd forgotten you mentioned that, and that's something, because I want to talk to Bill Afke and some of the other people who are on there too.
Yeah.
So I'm interested, so if you just talk about what happened on that fire.
We're
Just talking,
coming in.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
We were the box engine on that. I was at Station 5. I was about not quite a year old lieutenant on Engine 5. It was mid-morning, if I remember right. Anyway, we get the fire, and we can see there's a fire coming out the second floor, the back of the building, smoke and a little flame. Get there, and Engine 11 was already on the scene. Saw that they needed a line laid to them. I assisted getting that line pulled up and hooked into their engine, and then took a 3-inch line inside because that building had no standpipes, and I knew that from just being in it, inspecting it, not too awfully long before that. Got directed, the people inside were directing us to a storage room in the back, so we took the 3-inch line there wide off and took a couple 1 3/4 lines off that. 11's and my crew, and then 3's engine was coming in, and 7's engine was there. So we had to wait a while. There was a steel door that was locked. It was the door to the stairway that went up the loft, and they said the fire was in the loft above. There was also doors and a room that was directly underneath where the fire was at, and that's where they had these steel storage carts and various things stored back in there. Some of the guys went into the room where the carts were. The door was still being forced. We were waiting on the door to be forced to take our lines up. When the door got popped up, we went, took the line and hit the fire, and thought we knocked it down pretty much. So we're at the top of the staircase and advancing the line back, putting out, there was boxes and all kinds of stuff stored up there. I don't know what all it was, but anyway, put the hot spots, in the process of putting the hot spots out, and the floor just gave way. I mean, and that's when I fell through, not knowing that below me the collapse that had happened to the rest of the loft coming down on the guys down there below me. When the floor opened up, it actually, I didn't realize it at the time what was going on, but the floor opened up, it pinched the bill of my helmet and took my helmet off. And so I'm hanging, thinking, do I want to let go and drop? Or how far am I going to drop? Well, pretty soon I started hearing everybody hollering and screaming. I don't ever want to hear that again. And I knew the voices I was hearing was the other thing. And so I slowly started trying to ease myself down. While I was only about a foot off the rubble pile when I finally let go. As memory calls me, Dan Hansen was with me up there, Alfke, and I can't remember who. There were several, 2 or 3, or maybe, I don't think there was 4. John Armstrong was another. Was up on top of the rubble pile. And there was a window there that had been knocked out. Well, the fire had vented out that window. But at the time, we had the old 1-channel radio. They called it a brick. And you had 1 channel to communicate on. But everybody, the guys that were down there that could get to their radios, were trying to help. We need help. And everybody else, it's just chaos. There was nobody was understanding anything, and Bill Alfke got on the radio and asked for cease and desist on communication. Well, they're not. It's chaotic. people went out of there, the screaming continued. So they'd put a ladder up to the side of the building into that window. So knocked the rest of the window out, and I went out down the ladder and to find Chief Gregory. He was the shift commander, division chief of the shift at the time. And he was around the front entrance, so I went around the front entrance, told him, I said, we need to get some porta power equipment and what we had, and I said, I can't tell you how many people, but they're trapped down there. So then that was the only source of communicate where you could really communicate is face to face. So once I gave him that information, went back up the ladder and back in to help start pulling stuff off. Well, we just pulled it off piece by piece, and as we would pull the debris off, we'd find somebody. Pull the debris off and find somebody. For the most part, guys were slight injuries, nothing major. I mean, they were afraid of, there was cleaning fluids and stuff had been spilled on them, people were running out of air. Most guys were able to get out of their tanks because they were running out of air. They'd have suffocated if they hadn't been able to do that. Chris Pitts was the first one that we got to that was hurt bad, and he had I don't know how many places his leg was like, it was just like mush almost. The only thing I think that really saved was his boot. He had the day boots, you pull up 3/4 boots, and we were able to get Chris up and stabilize his leg, and then hand him. They brought a Stokes up, and we got him on the stretcher and out the stretcher. And in the bottom, they were working from the other side, and Jim Greason had been trapped down there, and they got him freed from underneath and got him moved out, and he had some pretty good burns on his back from where the stuff that had come down had laid on his back, and the thermal burns had radiated through the coat and given him some pretty bad, well, 3rd-degree burns on his back. He's down there. They got him out with Charlie Thompson was the last one down there. Well, me being one time when this being a little guy come in handy is I could make it down through the holes we'd created and work my way down to find Charlie. And Steve Sterrett was there with me, and we both went down. And Danny Hansman was there too, and I can't recall to where at and that, but he was there still. And we'd had the porta power equipment by then, because when I got to Charlie, he's contorted in the way I'm thinking, how are you even talking to me? But Charlie was still awake and talking, and I don't know who it was. Somebody down there was able to get his mask off of him, so that wasn't an issue. But his arms were bent back behind him, and he's spread-legged, and the beams down on him got him shoved down almost with his face to the floor. And anyway, we used the porta power equipment to again start raising stuff. And finally got it lifted up enough that we could work his way up, and we took him up through the hole we came out of. And I'll never forget, Larry Tucker was a brand new sub on the job, and Larry was a paramedic, one of the only paramedics we had at the time. And Larry volunteered to go up in a bucket, and he was able to come up with, I thought it was 13's bucket they put up, and Larry went in and got an IV started on him real quick and got him out that way. But it was a long day, and glad I haven't experienced anything like that since. But I know it's just part of the job. We all expect it, but when something like that happens and you hear the voices of the guys that you know are hollering, get your attention.
Yeah. Charlie, his back was broken, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah, he's I can't remember which vertebrae. He could, after a period of time, walk with the assistance of the braces on his leg, but he can't go over. And he's one of the most, I have a lot of respect for Charlie and his attitude. He never got a bad attitude over. Charlie's the same, happy go. He's the same pleasant person to be around. He never, woe is me or any of that I ever heard. So, me, Steve, and Charlie came on together, so there's a little history there. So, it could have been worse, I guess. I mean, we're lucky that a lot of guys didn't get hurt. I mean, the potential was there, but those carts saved a lot of guys because they caught the debris that had come down and created voids to where they didn't get slammed. Like, in fact, it did help Charlie from getting slammed completely down. There was a cart not too far from him that caught some of the stuff. But it was a day I'll never forget.
That's pretty interesting about the carts.
And the way my wife found out about it, I hope you edit some of this stuff. Yeah. So, is that my son was at Ball State at the time, and he was in between classes and going into the dorm, and the news is on, and they've got the live news coverage of it. And he had walked in, and they're showing me coming down the sidewalk, talking to Chief Gregory when I came out. And he called his mom and told her because she had no idea. And so then she came down from work and spent the rest of the afternoon there. But it was, like I say, a day I'll never forget. I got to be on the front page of the paper the next day coming out of that window. I got all kinds of phone calls on that one.
I was going to say, you had to buy steaks. Was there anything else you want to talk about?
No.
Okay.
I'll give you a little kind of a funny thing, but
sure.
When I was 14, we had to run over to we had a garage fire, and we were coming back from it. And we had a reserve where you're riding the tail end, and we're going by the Children's Museum, and somebody said there's a trash fire up there on the hill right by where the dinosaur thing wasn't there then, but the building was part of the old building. So we stopped, and I grabbed the red line, which was on the hose reel, and go up to put the trash fire out, and it wasn't a trash fire, it was a person. This guy had committing suicide. He poured gas over himself, was sitting there, and I go up to start, and he rolled over. But anyway, so I'd burnt my neck on the garage fire. Some stuff come down my neck. And by the time I got back, of course they got on the rail instead of taking me to the hospital. Well, the time I got back from the firehouse, the story was I went up to put the guy out. He rolled over and grabbed a hold of my neck and burnt my neck. So that just shows how stuff on the fire, the stuff can get started and grows. So
very quickly. Yeah. Jeez.
But I've just the experiences. I've been blown up, blown out. We had an oil furnace. You get a lot of runs on them. Not so much now, but back then you did. And this oil furnace had boomed, and we went down and again knocked it down, me and another guy. Well, it was still hot enough and stuff, enough vapors. It blew. And when it blew me back and him back. And next thing I know, here comes this hand down on me and up and out. And I didn't get hurt bad, but that guy was there and grabbed a hold of my coat and pulled me back up out of that. And that's another thing with live eye. My dad was still alive, and he's watching TV, and here they come on with the live eye bringing me out, and my face is all, it's not burnt, but it's black from the coal, the oil furnace blowing back on me like that, you know. And he like to have a heart attack on that. So, but again, never was I hurt bad. I fell through the Bemis Bag building floor. I was trying to be a good boy and had my air pack on, and I'd been on that fire. This was after the big fire we had over there. I don't know if you've heard about that. That place is built like a fortress, and we're walking through. We're just checking things out. The trash bar had been set in there. Not a lot of smoke or anything, enough that you couldn't really see where you're going. I'm walking along, stepped right in a hole. Somebody had cut a hole in the floor. I don't know if they were practicing with their saw or what. Down I went through the hole. But I attribute being in good physical shape. I kind of hit and just slid and didn't really get hurt bad. But.
Just one story for that?
Hmm?
Did you just go down to the next level?
Yeah, just one story.
Still a lot though for
yeah.
the whole warehouse.
And that is another thing that is different now that I've seen that has evolved is construction on home. I mean, anything built after 50 is good chance it's going to be lightweight construction. But most of the stuff down that we fought down here up around 14th Street is you can let it burn for quite a while. This stuff today you can't, and that's the scary thing. Getting the experience to know when to get out, and you don't have much time. You don't have it like you do up there. You can let those, like that Bemis Bag building could have burnt for days. I mean, it had 24-inch solid oak beams in it, and it burnt all day long that day, and it was, you go back in there and it was still solid as rock from stuff. So anyway, I hope you added a whole lot of that. Seriously, no, I don't like, I like talking to one-on-one, but I don't want all that to go to.
Yeah, well, it'll be all just stuff about the city and fire department, stuff like that. I'm not sure. Yeah. Right.
Well, use more Joe. Joe's a better speaker than me. I get tongue-tied sometimes.
You did fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, I've done a lot of interviews, and you did great.
Well, another area, and we didn't really get into it, but and it's more, I guess, I know because I know how guys feel about certain, and like with the second chief thing. Mm-hmm. That's all we need is another damn chief showing. You know, why do you need it? Well, it all goes back to when you went from 2 engines and a ladder and a squad and a chief to, you have a list of stuff. Well, and the other thing that's changed is back in the day, you didn't need that radio. You mark working fire and you never heard another word, unless they hit a box. And everybody didn't have one, so you didn't rely. It was more face-to-face or hollering or whatever. And you've evolved from that now to you've got all this stuff. Well, command is now responsible for managing all that. And then if you don't start giving people direction, they're going to want to know what to do, and then they're on the radio. And now the firefight's going on, and more chatter's going on there, and it's hard to manage. Even if you don't have a great big thing, just manage the radio traffic and manage, okay, if you don't need these companies, like the RIT team thing. We got 2 RIT teams. A lot of guys will let them sit there. It's their job to manage that scene. And it's evolved, and the department's not real good about, fire service period's not good about changes. And that's a change that's happened, and the reason that second chief is there is when it gets to that point, And somebody needs to be running the damn fire, not covering all this other stuff. So that guy ought to be going and being the operations guy and let this guy coming in and take care of all that stuff. But I don't think that's been, and I was as bad as anybody about not putting it out there and explaining it, I guess. But the worst thing is you can't, if you lose the respect and of the guys, if as long as something is there for a reason and doing something, they're good with it, they understand. But when you come up with bull crap stuff, and of course a lot of it is things you don't have any control over. That if you're going to follow NFPA, this is what you got to do, because that's what you're going to be judged on if something goes wrong. If something goes down the tubes, they don't bring your own people in. You know, somebody else comes in, looks at it, and did you do this? Did you do that? And if you had that resource there and you didn't use it, then so a lot of it's involved in the change. So.
Sure you want to come back and be
No,
chief?
no. Oh well, no. It's
Sure, come on now.
time is. That was one good thing is that I did do was leave that job and go back and be in Battalion 4 for my last year. So that's the fun part. That we need people that are prepared to do those jobs required. I wasn't prepared. I mean, for the administrative, all the stuff that goes with it. I never had any intention of doing that, you know. And the other thing is anybody that's in a chief's position, I think it's very important. They need to have done what you do, or this. They need to understand how far you can go, what you can do, and if they haven't, how can they?
A lot of people get promoted now.
I'm.
When you look at the list, you're like.
But
really?
it's that, and I don't know how you fix that, because you got to go through the process that somebody that really hadn't.
Some people take a test well. That's
They
all it
do.
takes.
They do, and that's where you just have. It's more important than anything. I mean, because you know how far I know. Like the good thing about when I did go back out, all the guys in Battalion 4, I knew them. I knew how they did their job, what they did. My job was easy. I just sat there and let them go, you know. And of course, you're there to take care of them, and not let them do anything real stupid. But for the most part, you let them go and let them do their job, and treat them with some respect, you know. And don't expect that every damn fire is going to go, you know. They don't work that way. They don't work that way. And a lot of, I don't know, a lot of people get the chief syndrome or something when they put that on them, and I think that's human nature.